A single phone call on a Monday morning ended my 25-year career. No reason, no warning, just a cold, corporate voice telling me to clear my desk by noon. At 50, I'd been erased like a line item on a spreadsheet. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed my silence meant surrender. They never imagined that the quiet woman they'd discarded still had copies of everything. And in that silence, I found my weapon. What started as my personal devastation would become their public apocalypse. My name is Margaret Holloway. Maggie to anyone who's known me longer than 5 minutes, and until 8:47 a.m. on that godforsaken Monday. I thought I understood the rules of corporate America. Work hard, stay loyal, keep your head down. 25 years at Brightwell Dynamics had taught me that formula, and I'd followed it religiously. The call came while I was reviewing quarterly projections in my corner office. Not the executive corner, mind you, but the one I'd earned after 2 decades of 60-hour weeks. Richard Callahan's assistant, a girl young enough to be my daughter, delivered the news with all the emotion of someone ordering coffee. Ms. Holloway? Mr. Callahan needs you to collect your personal belongings by noon. Security will escort you out. Your keycard has been deactivated. I actually laughed. It had to be a mistake. I'm sorry. What? I have the Peterson meeting at 2. That's been reassigned. HR will mail your final paperwork. The line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing while my computer screen flickered and went dark. Access denied. Just like that. I'd been deleted. The walk to my office, former office, felt like moving through water. Colleagues I'd mentored, hired, defended in countless meetings, suddenly found their screens fascinating as I passed. 25 years reduced to a banker's box. A photo of my daughter Emma at her college graduation. My lucky coffee mug from the Denver startup days. A cactus that had somehow survived longer than my marriage. Elena Brooks from HR stood waiting, her smile as sharp as her suit. Maggie, I know this is difficult. Why? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Just tell me why. Restructuring, nothing personal. She handed me a document. Sign this severance agreement, and you'll receive 3 months' pay. I scanned the pages. The real message was buried in legal jargon. Take the money, keep quiet, don't sue. The non-disclosure clause was particularly aggressive, threatening legal action if I so much as mentioned Brightwell's name on LinkedIn. And if I don't sign? Then you leave with nothing. Elena's smile never wavered. At your age, I'd consider carefully. The market isn't exactly welcoming to 50-year-old middle managers. At your age, the words hit like ice water. This wasn't restructuring. This was removal. Clean, surgical. Designed to make me disappear without a trace. Security arrived. Tom, who I'd bought coffee for every Christmas for 5 years, and wouldn't meet my eyes as he escorted me through the lobby. My keycard photo stared back from his tablet, already marked with a red X. Terminated. The Denver sunshine felt wrong on my face as I stood on the sidewalk, holding my pathetic box of belongings. Around me, the city hummed with purpose while I'd been surgically extracted from my own life. My phone buzzed with messages, former colleagues expressing shock, asking what happened, promising to stay in touch. We all knew they wouldn't. The drive home was autopilot. My townhouse in Stapleton felt like a museum of my former life. Awards from Brightwell on the shelf, company photos on the walls, even a Brightwell Dynamics fleece thrown over the couch. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the severance agreement, anger building with each heartbeat. They wanted me to disappear quietly, gratefully even, take my pittance and vanish into the statistical invisibility of unemployed women over 50. But something felt wrong beyond the cruelty of it. I'd been in the middle of 3 major projects, had just received a commendation last month. This wasn't about performance or restructuring. I pulled out my personal laptop and tried logging into my work email through the web portal, already blocked. But my old habit of forwarding important documents to my personal account suddenly felt like providence. As I scrolled through months of emails, a pattern emerged. Meetings I'd been excluded from, budget allocations that didn't match official reports, and Richard Callahan's name on everything. The anger crystallized into something harder, colder. They hadn't just taken my job, they'd tried to erase me entirely, as if 25 years meant nothing. But erasure only works if you don't leave copies. I didn't sign the severance agreement. Instead, I opened a new document and began typing. Personal notes on my termination from Brightwell Dynamics. If they wanted silence, they'd picked the wrong woman to bury. The first week after termination, I maintained the illusion of normalcy. Wake at 6 a.m., shower, dress in business casual, sit at my kitchen table with coffee and my laptop, pretending to job hunt while actually dissecting every forwarded email from Brightwell. The routine kept me from drowning in the silence of my empty townhouse. "Mom, you need to fight this," Emma said during our Tuesday video call from Seattle. My daughter had inherited my stubborn streak, but not my patience. Age discrimination is illegal. With what proof? They called it restructuring. But you know that's bullshit. I did know. But knowing and proving were different creatures entirely. "I'm exploring options," I told her, which wasn't entirely a lie. The whispers started reaching me by Thursday. Janet from accounting called, speaking barely above a whisper like she was afraid of being overheard. "Maggie, I shouldn't be calling. But something's happening here. 2 more people from your division were let go yesterday, both over 45. Who? David Chen and Patricia Williams. Same deal, immediate termination, security escort, severance agreements with ironclad NDAs. The pattern was becoming clearer. "Janet, have you noticed anything unusual with the Q3 budgets?" A long pause. "I can't talk about that. I'm sorry. Maggie. I have to go." The line went dead, another door closing. My ex-husband Paul called that weekend, having heard through Denver's incestuous business community. "Maggie, that's rough. You need anything?" "I'm fine. You were always too proud to ask for help." His voice carried that familiar note of disappointment that had soundtracked our marriage's collapse. "Linda and I are here if you need." I said I'm fine. "Paul." I wasn't fine. I was sleeping 3 hours a night, living on coffee and forgotten freezer meals, scrolling through LinkedIn jobs that all seemed to require being 20 years younger or having skills that didn't exist when I started my career. The rejection emails came with algorithmic efficiency. "While your qualifications are impressive, we've decided to pursue other candidates." Translation: "You're too old, too expensive, too everything we don't want anymore." By the second week, the concerned check-ins from former colleagues had dwindled to nothing. I'd become radioactive, a cautionary tale whispered about in break rooms. "Did you hear about Maggie Holloway? 25 years, and they just..." Snap of fingers. Gone. I started walking the neighborhood to escape the suffocating stillness of my house. Stapleton's suburban perfection. Young families pushing strollers, Teslas in driveways, lawns maintained by services I could no longer afford, felt like a mockery. During one walk, I ran into Susan Mitchell, another Brightwell refugee from 5 years ago. "Maggie, I heard. I'm so sorry." She touched my arm with practiced sympathy. "Have you thought about consulting? Or maybe teaching? Community colleges always need..." "I'm not ready to retire." I cut her off. "Oh, I didn't mean retire, just, adjusting expectations. At our age..." I walked away before she could finish. At our age. Like we were discussing osteoporosis treatments instead of careers. That night, I sat with a glass of wine, my third, staring at the severance agreement. 3 months' pay to stay quiet. It would cover the mortgage through the holidays. Maybe give me time to find something. Anything. My finger hovered over my lawyer friend Michelle's number, but I knew what she'd say. "Take the money. These fights are expensive and rarely won." But something Tom the security guard had said kept nagging at me. As he'd walked me out, he'd mumbled, "This ain't right, Ms. Holloway. You're the 4th this month." The 4th? Not from my division, from the entire company. I opened my laptop and started creating a timeline. My termination. David and Patricia from Janet's call. Who else? I searched LinkedIn, checking profiles of Brightwell employees I knew. Several hadn't posted in weeks. A few had updated to seeking new opportunities. All over 40. All from divisions with direct budget oversight. A text came through from an unknown number. Stop digging or your severance disappears. This is your only warning. My hands shook as I screenshot the message. They were watching, which meant there was something to watch for. I pulled up the last budget report I'd forwarded to myself. Line items for Project Prometheus, a name I'd never heard in any meeting. Allocated funds, $2.3 million. Project lead, R. Callahan. The wine glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. As I knelt to collect the pieces, a shard caught my palm, drawing blood. I watched it drip onto the white pages of the severance agreement, a crimson signature they'd never get. They wanted me silent and grateful for scraps. Instead, they'd created something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to expose. 3 weeks into unemployment, I turned my dining room into a war room. Printed emails covered every surface, highlighted and annotated with sticky notes. My laptop stayed open to spreadsheets I'd reconstructed from memory, trying to trace where $2.3 million could disappear into Project Prometheus. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, buried in an email chain from 6 months ago. I'd been CC'd by accident. Someone had meant to forward to E. Holland in legal, not E. Holloway. The thread discussed restructuring vendor contracts for maximum flexibility. Attached was a PDF I'd saved but never opened, a contract template with signature lines for companies I'd never heard of. Prometheus Solutions, Titan Analytics, Atlas Consulting, all mythology names. All registered to the same address in Delaware. My fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing payment schedules with vendor invoices. The pattern emerged like a photograph in Developer Fluid. Payments to these shell companies, approved by Richard Callahan, often just under the threshold requiring board review. Small enough to fly under radar. Frequent enough to add up to millions. I grabbed my phone to call someone. Anyone. Then stopped. Who would believe me? A bitter, terminated employee spinning conspiracy theories from her dining room. I needed more. The personal emails I'd forwarded were my only window into Brightwell now. I searched for anything mentioning the mythological companies. A single result appeared. An exchange where I'd questioned a payment to Prometheus Solutions. Richard's response had been swift. Already cleared with finance. Focus on your own deliverables, Maggie. But there was something else. An email I'd sent to myself the night before termination. With the subject line, Review Monday. Inside were photographs I'd taken of documents on Richard's desk during our last meeting. When he'd stepped out for a call, I'd forgotten about them entirely. The termination having derailed everything. The images were blurry but readable. Bank statements for an account in the Caymans. Wire transfer confirmations. And a handwritten note in Elena Brooks's distinctive script. Timeline, remove oversight by Q4. Remove oversight. They hadn't just fired me. They'd eliminated everyone who might question these transactions. My phone rang. Janet from accounting, her voice trembling. Maggie, I can't talk long. They're monitoring calls. But you need to know, the FBI was here yesterday. They took boxes from Richard's office. The FBI? Why? I don't know. But Elena's been shredding documents all morning. Whatever you're doing, be careful. The line went dead. I sat in my dim dining room, surrounded by evidence of something bigger than wrongful termination. This was fraud, embezzlement, and they'd fired anyone who might expose it. I pulled up the browser and searched FBI Denver financial crimes. Before I could second-guess myself, I was filling out an online tip form. But as I typed, doubt crept in. The FBI might take months to investigate. Meanwhile, Brightwell would continue operating, destroying evidence, ruining more lives. No, I needed another way. I remembered an investigative journalist who'd spoken at a Brightwell conference 2 years ago, Sarah Chen from the Denver Post. She'd given a presentation on corporate accountability that Richard had called unnecessarily aggressive. Perfect. Finding her email was easy. Crafting the message took 3 drafts. Ms. Chen, I have documented evidence of systematic financial fraud at Brightwell Dynamics, including shell companies, offshore accounts, and the strategic termination of employees who could expose the scheme. I'm willing to share everything. On the record, Margaret Holloway, former senior manager, Brightwell Dynamics. My finger hovered over send. Once this email left, there was no going back. No severance, no quiet exit, no pretending this hadn't happened. A new text arrived from the unknown number. Final warning, sign the agreement by Friday or face legal action. I actually laughed, alone in my dining room at 3 a.m. Legal action? They wanted to threaten me with lawyers when they'd already taken everything? I hit send on the email to Sarah Chen. Then I opened a new document and began typing everything I knew, every detail, every suspicious transaction. If they wanted to threaten legal action, I'd give them something worth suing over. But by then, it would be too late. The truth would already be out there. My phone buzzed. Sarah Chen, can you meet tomorrow? Bring everything. For the first time in 3 weeks, I smiled. They'd fired me to keep me quiet. Instead, they'd set me free to be loud as hell. I gathered the printed emails, photographs, and reconstructed spreadsheets into a box, not unlike the pathetic box I'd carried out of Brightwell. But this one wasn't filled with the remnants of a career. It was filled with weapons. Tomorrow, I'd hand over everything. And Richard Callahan was about to learn what happens when you try to bury someone who keeps copies. The coffee shop Sarah suggested was deliberate, public enough to feel safe, loud enough to mask our conversation. I arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a corner booth with clear sightlines to both exits. Paranoid? Maybe. But the black sedan that had been parked outside my house for 3 days suggested caution wasn't unreasonable. Sarah arrived precisely on time, professional in a way that made me nostalgic for my own power suits. She slid into the booth across from me, eyes already scanning the box of documents I'd placed on the table. Ms. Holloway, before we start, I need to know, are you doing this for revenge or justice? Does it matter? To my editors, yes. To the story? No. I appreciated her honesty. Both. They destroyed my career to hide their crimes. I want them exposed. She pulled out a recorder. Tell me everything. For 2 hours, I walked her through the maze of shell companies, falsified invoices, and strategic terminations. Sarah's expression shifted from skeptical to intrigued to genuinely shocked as I showed her the Cayman account statements, the wire transfers, the handwritten note about removing oversight. This is bigger than embezzlement, she said finally. If these pension fund allocations are accurate, they've been stealing from employee retirements. My stomach dropped. I'd been so focused on the vendor fraud, I'd missed that connection. How much? Based on these numbers, potentially millions. Every Brightwell employee's retirement is underfunded while that money went to, she checked her notes, Prometheus Solutions and its sister companies. All controlled by Richard Callahan? That's what I need to prove, but this, she tapped the documents, is enough to start pulling threads. A text buzzed on my phone. Unknown number again. You were warned. Sarah noticed my face change. They're threatening you? I showed her the message, plus screenshots of the others. She photographed them with her phone. Ms. Holloway, Maggie, once this story runs, you'll be painted as a disgruntled employee. They'll attack your credibility, your mental state, everything. They already took everything. What's left to attack? She studied me for a long moment. All right. Give me a week to verify independently. Don't talk to anyone else about this. And Maggie? Maybe stay with someone for a while. That night, I deadbolted my doors and pushed a chair against the bedroom door. The black sedan was still outside. I lay awake thinking about every colleague still at Brightwell. working toward retirements that were being stolen. About Richard Callahan's smug face during meetings, knowing he was robbing us all. At 3 a.m., my work phone, the one I'd forgotten to return, suddenly powered on by itself. It had been dead for weeks. A single message appeared: "Drop this, or we drop you." I threw the phone across the room, where it shattered against the wall. Let them come. I'd already given Sarah everything. The truth was out of my hands now, gathering momentum like a boulder rolling downhill. Richard Callahan had made a critical error. He'd assumed that destroying my career would destroy me. Instead, he'd freed me from the very thing that had kept me silent, the need to protect a job that no longer existed. The doorbell rang at 7 a.m. on Saturday. Through the peephole, I saw a man in his 30s, rumpled t-shirt and jeans, holding a motorcycle helmet. Not exactly the corporate assassin I'd been expecting. "Ms. Holloway, I'm Jordan Reeves. I used to work at Brightwell, IT department. We need to talk." "How did you find my address?" "I built half of Brightwell's data systems. Finding things is what I do." He glanced at the black sedan. "They've been watching me too. Can I come in? I have information you need." Against my better judgment, I let him in. Jordan sprawled on my couch like he belonged there, pulling out a laptop covered in programming stickers. "They fired me 6 months ago," he began, "officially for security violations. Actually for asking why certain database tables were hidden from standard audit logs. Hidden tables, ghost records, transactions that exist in the system but never appear in reports. I started documenting them before they locked me out." He turned his laptop toward me. "But here's the thing, I built a backdoor. I've been watching them delete evidence for weeks." My heart raced. "You can prove they're covering it up?" "Better, I can prove who's involved." He pulled up a complex diagram showing connections between employees and suspicious transactions. Richard Callahan is the obvious one, but look. Elena Brooks has been authorizing personnel changes that coincidentally removed everyone with database access. The CFO, Marcus Webb, has been signing off on every fraudulent vendor. Webb. But he always seemed clean. Yeah, that's his brand. Meanwhile, he's been moving money through 12 different shell companies. Jordan showed me transaction logs, deleted emails he'd recovered, even security footage of documents being shredded after hours. It was a goldmine of evidence, far beyond what I'd collected. "Why didn't you go to the authorities?" I asked. "With what credibility? I'm a fired IT guy who hacked his former employer. They'd arrest me before I finished talking." He closed his laptop. "But you're different. You're the respectable manager they wrongfully terminated. Together, we're a pattern of silencing whistleblowers." "There's a journalist, Sarah Martinez from the Denver Post." "Yeah, I know. I've been feeding her technical data anonymously. But she needs a face to the story, someone sympathetic. That's you." I studied Jordan, brilliant, angry, and reckless in the way only someone young enough to rebuild could be. "What do you want out of this?" "Same as you. To watch them burn." He grinned. "Also, I shorted Brightwell stock 3 weeks ago. When this breaks, I'll make enough to start my own company." "That's insider trading." "That's justice. They stole my future. I'm taking some back." His phone buzzed. He read it and frowned. "We have a problem. My source inside says they're planning to fire another wave Monday. Anyone who might cooperate with investigators." "How many?" 15 people, all over 40. All with systems access. 15 more careers destroyed to cover their tracks. We need to move faster." "Agreed. I can dump everything I have to Sarah tonight, but..." He hesitated. "There's something else. I found records of a meeting next Thursday. Richard, Elena, Webb, and some external auditors. They're planning to blame everything on one person." "Who?" Jordan turned his laptop back to me. On the screen was my personnel file, with notes added: history of mental health issues, bitter about lack of promotion, access to financial systems, perfect profile for rogue employee. They weren't just covering up their crimes. They were planning to frame me for them. Monday arrived with the precision of an execution date. By 8 a.m., Jordan's prediction materialized. 15 more Brightwell employees were terminated, their digital footprints already being scrubbed from company servers. I watched from my laptop as their LinkedIn profiles updated in real time, seeking new opportunities. Open to work. Excited for the next chapter. Corporate speak for devastation. Jordan and I worked from his apartment now, a chaotic space in Capitol Hill that smelled of energy drinks and burnt coffee. His setup looked like something from a hacker movie. 3 monitors, cables everywhere, and a whiteboard covered in connection diagrams that mapped Brightwell's fraud like a cancer spreading through spreadsheets. "They're accelerating," he said, fingers flying across his keyboard. "Look at this. They're scheduling a system-wide maintenance for Wednesday night. Want to bet what disappears during that downtime?" "Everything," I said, watching transaction logs vanish in real time. "We need Sarah to publish before then. She needs one more thing, direct proof linking Richard to the offshore accounts. Everything else is circumstantial." That's when my phone rang. Janet from accounting, barely whispering, "Maggie, I can't talk long, but I found something. Remember the Prometheus invoices? I traced the approval codes. They all linked to a single workstation login, Richard's. But here's the thing, half of them were approved while he was supposedly on vacation in Europe. Someone else was using his credentials. Who? The login location traces to Elena Brooks's office computer. The pieces clicked. They're in it together. But if things go wrong, Richard takes the fall alone. Elena positioned herself perfectly. Janet's voice cracked. "Maggie, they're watching everyone. I think they know I've been looking. Get out of there, now." "I can't. I need this job. Just be careful." Jordan was already pulling up the login records Janet mentioned. Holy shit, she's right. Elena's been using Richard's credentials for months. But look. He highlighted a pattern. She only does it for transactions over $500K, keeping her hands clean on the small stuff. She's building a case against him while profiting from the scheme. Mutual destruction. If he goes down, he takes her with him, except... Jordan pulled up another screen. She's been moving her share offshore, different banks, different countries. She's planning an exit. My phone buzzed. Sarah Martinez. Need to meet. Urgent. 1 hour. Same place. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. Sarah looked exhausted, stressed in a way that made my stomach drop. "They know," she said without preamble. "Brightwell's lawyers contacted the paper this morning. They're threatening to sue if we publish. They claim you stole proprietary information, that Jordan hacked their systems illegally, that this is all a vindictive conspiracy. But the evidence is solid. My editors believe the story. But they're scared of the legal costs." She pulled out a folder. "However, there's another option. The FBI reached out to me. They want to cut a deal." "What kind of deal?" "You and Jordan provide evidence directly to them. In exchange, you get immunity from any prosecution for how you obtained it. They build a federal case, and once indictments are filed, we publish everything." "How long would that take?" "Weeks, maybe months. They're destroying evidence right now. In 3 days, there won't be anything left to find." Sarah leaned forward. "Then we need something so explosive they can't bury it, something that forces the FBI to act immediately." Jordan texted me, 911, "Get back here now." I found him staring at his screens in shock. "I found it. The smoking gun." He pulled up a video file. Security footage from last Tuesday. Richard and Webb in the server room after hours. The grainy footage showed them at a terminal, but the audio was clear. "How much have we moved?" Richard's voice. 8.7 million. The pension adjustments will hide it until the next audit. And if someone notices. That's why we're cleaning house. No one left to notice. Jordan looked at me. This is it. Conspiracy, admission of guilt, evidence of ongoing crime. And it's all from Brightwell's own security system. How did you? They forgot to delete the backup server in the old building. Amateurs. I called Sarah. We have them. Video confession. Can you publish tonight? Send it now, if it's what you say. We go live by midnight. As Jordan uploaded the file, I felt the weight of weeks lifting. They'd tried to bury me, silence me, frame me. But they'd forgotten the first rule of corporate crime. It's not the crime that gets you, it's the cover-up. And their cover-up was about to be blown wide open. At 11:47 p.m., Sarah's story went live on the Denver Post website. The headline was perfect. Brightwell Dynamics executives caught on video admitting to $8.7 million pension fraud. Jordan and I watched from his apartment as the view counter climbed hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands within the first hour. The video was embedded at the top. Richard's voice confessing to crimes with crystalline clarity. My phone erupted with messages from former colleagues, reporters, and numbers I didn't recognize. By 6 a.m., it was the lead story on local news. By 8 a.m., CNBC had picked it up. Brightwell's stock price plummeted 30% at market open. But we weren't done. Jordan had programmed a dead man's switch every hour. Another document would automatically upload to a public server. Invoices at 9 a.m. Wire transfer records at 10 a.m. Elena's forged authorization logs at 11 a.m. Like a slow-motion avalanche, each revelation built on the last. They're in full panic mode, Jordan said, monitoring Brightwell's internal communications through his back door. Emergency board meeting in an hour. FBI just arrived at the building. My phone rang. Elena Brooks. Hello, Elena. Maggie. Her voice was ice. I'm prepared to offer you $5 million to retract your statements and claim the documents were fabricated. $5 million? That's less than what you stole. It's more than you'll ever see otherwise. Think about it. A comfortable retirement versus years of legal battles. I am thinking about it. I'm thinking about Janet in accounting, who won't be able to retire because you stole her pension. About the 15 people you fired yesterday to cover your tracks. Don't be naive. This is how business works. No, Elena. This is how criminals work. You've made a powerful enemy. Maggie. This won't end well for you. It already has. I'm recording this call, by the way. She hung up. At noon, Richard Callahan was arrested in the Brightwell lobby, cameras capturing his perp walk in high definition. Elena Brooks was taken from her home in handcuffs an hour later. Marcus Webb tried to flee to the airport but was intercepted by federal agents. Sarah called with updates throughout the day. The FBI is seizing everything. They're saying it's one of the largest corporate fraud cases in Colorado history. You did it, Maggie. But the masterpiece came at 3 p.m. Jordan had saved the best for last. A folder labeled Executive Communications containing 3 years of emails between Richard, Elena, and Webb. Every criminal conspiracy, every terminated employee discussed like cattle, every joke about the sheep in the pen not knowing they were being fleeced. The public rage was immediate and visceral. Brightwell's headquarters was surrounded by protesters, employees who'd lost their retirements, terminated workers demanding justice. The board announced an emergency shutdown, all operations suspended pending investigation. That evening, I sat in my dining room, my war room, watching the news coverage. They showed my corporate photo from 6 months ago, describing me as the whistleblower who brought down a giant. Jordan was mentioned as a crucial technical source, his identity still protected at his request. A text came through from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart seized. Another threat? But when I opened it, I laughed out loud. Ms. Holloway, this is Tom from security. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you. They made me escort out 12 good people this month. Seeing Richard in handcuffs was the best day I've had in years. Then another. From Patricia Williams. Maggie, you gave us justice. Thank you. And another. Messages from the terminated, the cheated, the silenced. We'd all been isolated, picked off one by one, made to feel alone and powerless. But together, our voices had become a roar that brought down an empire. Jordan showed up at my door with champagne and takeout Chinese. Stocks down 67%, trading suspended. The SEC is opening a formal investigation. What happens to the employees who still work there? Federal oversight. The pension fund will be restored from seized assets. New management? They'll be okay. We sat on my couch, watching the news cycle repeat our story, each iteration adding new details, new outrage. The investigative reporter in me would have been horrified by some of the sensationalism. But the woman who'd been discarded at 50, threatened and nearly framed, felt nothing but satisfaction. You know they'll try to sue us personally, Jordan said. Let them. We have the truth. And good lawyers. The ACLU called me today. They want to take our case pro bono, something about corporate accountability and whistleblower protection. I raised my glass. To unemployment. The best thing that ever happened to us. To revenge, Jordan corrected. Served at exactly the right temperature. As we toasted, my laptop dinged with an email from Sarah Martinez. Pulitzer Committee called. You're going to need a dress for the ceremony. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse in downtown Denver, watching Richard Callahan receive his sentence, 15 years for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Elena Brooks got 12 years, despite her lawyer's attempts to paint her as a victim of Richard's manipulation. Marcus Webb, who'd flipped and testified against them both, received 7 years. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. You didn't just steal money. You stole futures, security, and trust. You destroyed careers to hide your greed. This sentence reflects the severity of that betrayal. As they led Richard away, he turned to look at me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something I didn't expect. Fear. He was 55, facing a decade and a half in federal prison. His assets frozen, reputation destroyed, family abandoned him. He'd lost everything, just like he'd tried to make me lose everything. I felt no satisfaction in his fear, only a quiet sense of completion. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I'd learned to handle them over the months, to give sound bites that told the story without sensation. Justice was served. Every employee who lost their retirement will be made whole. That's what matters. Jordan had become something of a tech hero, parlaying his whistleblower status into a successful cybersecurity firm. He hired 7 of the terminated Brightwell employees, including Janet from accounting as his CFOs. Turns out honest people make the best security experts, he told me. Sarah Martinez won her Pulitzer, as predicted. The story had grown beyond Brightwell, spurring investigations into similar schemes at other corporations. 3 more companies had been exposed using our case as a template. We'd started something bigger than revenge. We'd started a reckoning. I never returned to corporate life. The offers came, certainly. Companies wanting to hire the woman who exposed Brightwell, thinking my presence would somehow guarantee their ethics. But I'd learned something in those weeks of investigation, in the transformation from victim to warrior. I didn't need their validation anymore. Instead, I started a consulting firm, helping terminated employees gather evidence of wrongful dismissal, teaching them their rights, showing them how to document discrimination and fraud. My first client was David Patterson, fired from another tech firm at 52, 2 years shy of his pension vesting. We got him a settlement and his full retirement. Emma flew in from Seattle for the sentencing. That evening, we sat in my backyard, the same yard where I'd spent sleepless nights planning my revenge. I'm proud of you, Mom, she said. Not for taking them down, for getting back up. I almost didn't. That first week, I thought about taking their money and disappearing. But you didn't. No, because silence would have meant they won. I watched the Denver sunset paint the mountains gold. They thought firing me would be the end of my story. Instead, it was just the beginning of theirs. The black sedan that had watched my house for weeks never returned after the arrests. The threatening texts stopped. The fear faded. What remained was something unexpected. Peace. Not the peace of forgiveness. I'd never forgive them for what they'd done to so many. But the peace of completion, of a debt paid in full. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Celebrating the sentencing with the team. You in? I smiled, typing back, on my way. As I drove through Denver toward Jordan's office, filled with people Brightwell had discarded, now building something new, I thought about silence. How they'd counted on it, how they'd threatened for it, how they'd paid millions to maintain it. But silence, I'd learned, was only powerful when it was chosen. When it was forced, it became something else entirely. Fuel. Waiting for a spark. They'd fired me to keep their secrets buried. Instead, my silence had become a roar that echoed through federal court, through news cycles, through the lives of everyone who'd been told they were disposable after 40, 50, 60. Richard Callahan had been right about one thing during our last legitimate meeting, a week before my termination. He'd said, "Maggie, in business, you have to know when to keep quiet." He was right. You do have to know when to keep quiet. And more importantly, you have to know when to burn it all down with the truth. The building where Jordan's company operated used to house a Brightwell satellite office. We'd bought it for pennies on the dollar after their bankruptcy filing. The ultimate irony, their assets becoming our foundation. As I parked, I saw the new sign going up. Phoenix Digital Security. Rising from the ashes. It was a bit on the nose, but Jordan had insisted. And I'd learned to trust his instincts. Inside, champagne was flowing. Former Brightwell employees, journalists, even Tom the security guard who'd become our head of physical security. We'd all been scattered. But the fight had brought us together. Janet raised a glass. To Maggie Holloway, who taught us that revenge is a dish best served with documentation. Everyone laughed, drank, celebrated. But I stood for a moment in the doorway, watching these people who'd refused to be erased, who'd transformed their termination into triumph. They'd tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Maggie's situation? Let me know in the comments.